Across the vastness of the galaxy, peace had reigned for centuries. The Galactic Council, a meeting of powerful alien species, had been a symbol of unity. Alien empires, some advanced beyond imagination, others still in their early stages, had coexisted peacefully, trading knowledge and technology, ensuring that no one empire would dominate the others. But that was before the silence. It started as a whisper, a rumor passing through the deep space communication channels. One by one, systems that once thrived with activity fell silent. Colonies on the edges of the galaxy, once vibrant with life and trade, suddenly stopped sending messages. Some vanished without a trace, while others sent fragmented signals that spoke of terror and destruction. The once trustworthy scouts sent to investigate these reports never returned. It wasn't long before the Galactic Council convened a secret meeting to discuss the mystery. Representatives from the great species of the galaxy, tall, imposing Zarnax, peaceful Nivan, and the ancient, mysterious Eshkali, gathered in a massive chamber aboard the Council's flagship. The room was large enough to hold thousands, yet only a handful were present. The tension in the air was thick. For the first time in a long while, the great leaders were afraid. The leader of the Zarnax, a warrior species known for their towering strength and deep knowledge of battle tactics, stood before the council. His voice was firm, but there was a crack in it, the first sign of worry. "We have heard the stories," the Zarnak commander said, his dark eyes scanning the room. "Worlds that fell without a fight, not even a trace left behind. Our scouts went in and never returned. We are no longer dealing with a normal threat. Whatever is out there is not like any enemy we have faced. The Eshkali, a race of highly intelligent beings known for their manipulation of time and energy, remained silent. Their leader, a slender figure with glowing blue skin, didn't speak for several moments. When they did, their voice echoed with a calm that only added to the growing unease in the room. "It's true," the Eshkali leader said. "What we are facing is something different, something primal. Perhaps we have underestimated the dangers of this universe. Our research into this phenomenon indicates that these attackers are unlike anything we have studied. They leave no mark, no sign of their presence, except for the destruction they bring." The room fell silent, and the alien leaders exchanged wary glances. The fear was palpable now. Whatever they were dealing with was something none of them had ever seen, let alone prepared for. "I think we all know what this means," the Nivan representative spoke up. The Nivan were known for their wisdom and diplomacy, yet their eyes were clouded with doubt. "Our way of life, the peace we have built, is at risk. If whatever this is continues, it could tear everything apart." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The council had always been a symbol of strength and unity. They had faced wars before, dealt with hostile forces, and kept the peace among the stars. But nothing like this. There was no enemy to fight, no force to counter, only the silence, and then came the report. A single ship, unknown to the council, had entered the galaxy. It was small but seemingly indestructible. It passed through the dark space at the edge of known territories, where most ships dared not venture. The reports about the ship were conflicting. Some said it had been spotted hovering near abandoned colonies. Others claimed it was moving swiftly and silently across the galaxy. Whatever it was unlike anything the council had seen. This ship, dark and ominous, had its own mark of destruction. No one knew who had built it or why it was here, but there were whispers among the galaxy's spies, whispers of humans. These whispers spoke of a species living on a world known as Earth, a place rumored to be violent, chaotic, and filled with creatures capable of surviving even the harshest environments. The council was unsure of what to make of these rumors. Humans. They were a race still in its infancy compared to the civilizations of the council. They had no real presence in the galaxy, no power to challenge any of the mighty species that made up the council. Yet the whispers suggested something far more unsettling. The humans had somehow made their way to the galaxy's edges, and now, it seemed, they were taking out the alien colonies one by one. The Zarnak commander slammed his fist onto the table. "Enough with the whispers! We need action! These humans, if they are indeed the ones behind this, must be stopped before they destroy everything we've worked for." But the Eshkali leader shook their head, their glowing blue eyes flickering with understanding. "We cannot simply rush into battle. There is something about these humans that we do not fully comprehend. They are unlike any species we've encountered. They are survivors." There was a pause, and a chilling realization began to settle in. The humans, if they truly were behind this, were not an ordinary species. They weren't the usual kind of enemy. They weren't just fighting to conquer. They were fighting to survive. The Zarnak commander looked at the holographic display of the galaxy. It was a vast, beautiful thing, filled with endless stars, countless planets, and the rich diversity of life. But now, there was a shadow creeping across its edges. The unknown threat that had already taken so many worlds was moving closer, and no one knew what was waiting for them. "This is not just a war," the Zarnak commander said grimly. "This is something far worse. These humans aren't just attacking, they are hunting. They are adapting to this galaxy's challenges in ways we cannot predict. We must find them, learn from them, and stop them before they destroy everything." The room was filled with a heavy silence. For the first time, the greatest minds of the galaxy were not sure what to do. No one knew what would come next, or how to fight an enemy that might not even be truly seen, but only felt. And in the quiet of the council chamber, something else lingered in the air, an understanding that soon the galaxy would change forever. The Deathworlders had come, and they were not here to negotiate. They were here to survive, and that survival would cost the galaxy more than it had ever imagined. The galaxy, once a place of trade, peace, and discovery, now teetered on the edge of fear. The rumors surrounding the humans, the Deathworlders, were growing louder and more unsettling with every passing day. No one had truly seen them, not up close, but their presence was undeniable. The silence in the galaxy had deepened, and soon, even the bravest leaders of the Galactic Council were beginning to question their own safety. The council chambers were filled with a tense atmosphere, as representatives from every corner of the galaxy gathered to discuss their options. No one knew where the humans came from, or even what they looked like, but the whispers were enough to shake the foundation of the galaxy's peace. Alien fleets had vanished without a trace, their signals distorted and broken. No warning shots, no last stand, just silence. "Something is wrong," the Zarnak commander said, his voice heavy with concern. "We've lost contact with every outpost along the outer rim, and the ships, they disappear as if they were never there. This is no accident. This is a deliberate, calculated attack." His eyes scanned the room, meeting the gazes of the other leaders. The Nevon representative, a species known for their calm demeanor and vast intellect, leaned forward, speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just the outposts. We've received reports from planets on the inner rim, too. Entire cities have gone dark. We sent our fastest ships to investigate, but they returned with nothing. The crew was lost." The Nivon leader paused, as if the weight of the words was too much to bear. "We believe they're not simply vanishing. They are being destroyed, but we don't know how. There's no evidence of conventional weapons." The Eshkali, with their ethereal glowing skin, spoke next. "It's more than destruction. This presence, this force leaves no trace. No debris, no ships, no signs of battle. Nothing. It's as if they just vanish." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled over the council. The galaxy's most advanced species were in the dark, and they were terrified. They had faced challenges before, wars, invasions, betrayals, but never something like this. "We need to learn more," the Zarnak commander declared, standing tall and imposing as ever. "We need to understand who these Deathworlders are, and we need to prepare. Whatever they are doing, it isn't just about defeating us. It's about eliminating us completely." And so the Council sent its best operatives, an elite team of spies and tacticians, into the uncharted regions of space. Their mission was simple: find the Deathworlders and return with information. But nothing was simple anymore. As the operatives traveled deeper into the unknown, they encountered strange signs of the humans' presence. It wasn't just the silence or the disappearing ships. It was the remnants left behind. Wrecked alien vessels, hulls torn apart with precision, and strange marks on the ground where once thriving cities now lay in ruins. The survivors, if any, existed, were too terrified to speak. Those who tried were often found in the same state, broken, terrified, their minds shattered by the sheer horror of whatever they had witnessed. Weeks passed with no contact from the operatives until one ship returned. Its crew was rattled, their faces pale and haunted. The ship's captain, an experienced Nivon scout named Arios, was the first to speak when the Council gathered to debrief. "They're real," Arios said, his voice shaking. "I don't know what we saw, but it was them. The Deathworlders. They came from nowhere. They didn't make a sound, didn't announce their arrival. One moment we were approaching a neutral system, and the next, we were under attack." The room grew tense as the Council leaned in, eager to hear more. Arios continued, his eyes distant as he recalled the horrors his team had encountered. "They didn't use weapons like any we've seen before. We couldn't track them. It was as if they moved through the air, blending into the shadows. We tried to fight back, but it was useless. We never even saw them until it was too late. One of our ships just disappeared. No explosion, no warning. It was as if it was erased from existence." The Zarnak commander clenched his fists, frustration and fear clouding his judgment. "How do we fight an enemy we can't even see? How do we defend ourselves when they're already here?" The Nivon representative, ever the diplomat, spoke up. "We need to think carefully. These Deathworlders are not a typical enemy. We can't simply fight them head-on. We must understand them, learn their ways, and perhaps even negotiate." But the Eshkali leader's voice cut through the room, cold and direct. "There will be no negotiation. Not with these creatures. They are not here for peace. They are here for something far darker." Arios nodded in agreement, his expression grim. "We did not see their faces. We only saw the aftermath. But we could feel their presence, like an invisible weight pressing down on us. I don't know how to describe it. It was as if we were being hunted." The Council's chamber was filled with a sense of dread. Every species present, from the Zarnaks to the Eshkali, knew that a new kind of predator had arrived. But what terrified them more than the unknown was the possibility that they might not survive long enough to learn what the humans truly wanted. "What do we know about them?" the Zarnak commander asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Who are they? Where do they come from? What drives them?" Arios's eyes darkened. "We know they're human, but we don't understand how they operate. They are different from us. They don't fear the dangers of the universe. In fact, they thrive in them. They are survivors, and survival is their only goal." The room fell silent again as the implications of those words hung heavily in the air. The humans weren't just another species to conquer. They were something else entirely. A force of nature, honed by their violent homeworld, a race that could not be stopped by conventional means. "The galaxy has never faced anything like this before," the Eshkali leader said, their voice echoing in the quiet room. "We are facing an enemy that has no rules, no limits. If we are to survive, we must adapt." The fear was real now. The Deathworlders were not just a threat. They were the ultimate predator, a force that could bring the galaxy to its knees. But there was one thing that no one had anticipated. The humans were not the only predators in this galaxy, and the greatest danger may not be what they had seen, but what they were yet to understand. The stars had always been a symbol of peace and wonder. But now, the space between them was filled with dread. The rumors, the whispers, the stories, all of it had led to this moment. The Deathworlders were real, and they had come. And the galaxy, once united in its prosperity, was now divided by fear and uncertainty. The Galactic Council had failed to come to any conclusive plan. The alien leaders were at a loss. The Deathworlders had shown no mercy, no sign of weakness. Every step they took seemed to be calculated and precise, their goals clear, survival, and they had no intention of negotiating. As one of the Eshkali leaders had warned, they were not here for peace. They were here to conquer and to survive at any cost. Across the galaxy, fear spread like wildfire. It wasn't just the outer rim colonies now. The core systems were starting to feel the tremors of the coming storm. Fleet after fleet had been sent into the unknown, only to vanish without a trace. No messages, no warnings, just emptiness. And when the survivors finally spoke, their faces told a tale far worse than any words could describe. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they weren't afraid of anything. On a quiet planet in the heart of the galaxy, the calm was shattered one morning when the first strike came. It wasn't a battle, at least not in the way the Council had anticipated. There was no warning shot, no declaration of war. It was silent, like a predator stalking its prey, watching from the shadows. The planet, once a thriving hub of trade and culture, lay in peace beneath a golden sky. But that peace was broken when the first explosion rocked the planet's surface. The shock wave was felt in the capital city, followed by a deep, bone-rattling tremor. The sky turned dark as a fleet of unknown ships dropped from the atmosphere with terrifying speed. These were not the sleek, shining ships of the Council's fleet. These were dark, rough, and built for battle against an environment that wanted to kill everything on it. The planet's defense systems were no match. The attackers were everywhere, landing silently and swiftly in the city's heart. The first wave came in through the city's outskirts, their dark ships touching down in places where no one could imagine an invasion would come. There were no massive space battles, no fleets clashing in the sky. It was quick, quiet, and ruthless. They moved like shadows, silent, quick, and impossible to track. And then they were everywhere. Humans. They didn't come in overwhelming numbers, but they didn't need to. The alien defenders, though well-trained, had no idea how to respond. The humans didn't fight by the usual rules of warfare. They didn't engage in long, drawn-out battles. They didn't wait for reinforcements. They simply struck, quick and deadly. Human soldiers moved through the streets like ghosts, appearing in the shadows and disappearing just as quickly. They attacked with precision and brutality, overwhelming every resistance with terrifying efficiency. Lena, a young alien officer from the planet, had been in charge of securing the city's outer defenses. She was one of the first to witness the humans' deadly efficiency. Her forces had been stationed on the edge of the city when the first attack occurred, but it was too late. The enemy had already breached the main gate. She had heard reports of human soldiers moving across the city, leaving destruction in their wake, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. In the distance, she saw one of the human soldiers, standing atop a fallen building, his dark silhouette stark against the glow of the burning city. He was alone, his rifle slung over his shoulder, but there was a calmness to him, a terrifying confidence that made Lena's blood run cold. There was no rush, no panic in his movements. He simply waited, observing, as if he knew the outcome. Already? They are everywhere, Lena muttered to herself, gripping her weapon tightly. She had trained her whole life for battle. But what she was witnessing now was unlike anything she had prepared for. The humans were not afraid. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for the enemy to make a move. They didn't even need to outnumber their opponents. They fought with a kind of savage calmness, striking when necessary and disappearing before their enemies could retaliate. It wasn't about overwhelming power. It was about strategy, survival, and complete control of the situation. And then the second wave came. More ships dropped from the sky, but this time they weren't alone. There were no weapons, no explosions, no signs of an imminent fight. Instead, the humans began to take prisoners. They didn't kill every alien they encountered, though their assault was brutal. Some of the survivors were captured, but no one knew why. No one knew what the humans wanted with them. Lena was among the captured. She had fought fiercely, trying to protect her city, but her efforts were in vain. The humans had moved with such speed and efficiency that there was no chance of victory. And now she was a prisoner, standing before one of their leaders. The human in front of her wasn't imposing in stature. He was shorter than most of the alien officers she had encountered, but there was a quiet power in his eyes. His expression was unreadable. He spoke, but his words weren't threatening. Instead, they were simple and direct. "You're alive because we need to understand you," he said. "We need to know what you value, what you're willing to fight for. We're not here to destroy you. We're here to survive." Lena stood frozen, her mind racing. She didn't understand. Survival? After the chaos, the destruction she had witnessed, this was all the human cared about? Survival? And yet, there was a terrifying honesty in his voice. It wasn't a plea, nor was it a threat. It was a fact. The humans had no interest in conquest for the sake of power or wealth. They didn't want to rule the galaxy. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted to be left alone to survive. And they would stop at nothing to achieve it. The attack on the planet was not the first, and it would not be the last. The galaxy now faced an enemy it didn't understand, an enemy that didn't fight for control, but for the simple right to exist. The Deathworlders had come, and they would not be stopped. The galaxy, once brimming with unity and peace, was now a place gripped by fear. The Deathworlders, humans, had made their intentions clear. They weren't here for riches or power. They weren't after dominance or to build an empire. Their only goal was survival, and they would do anything to ensure that survival. The silence that had followed their invasion spoke volumes. This was not an enemy who could be defeated easily. In the Galactic Council chambers, the leaders of the galaxy's greatest species met again. This time there was no diplomatic banter, no pleasant greetings. The room was filled with tension, with the weight of an impossible decision hanging in the air. The Council, which had long held sway over the galaxy's peace, was now questioning its ability to protect the very galaxy it had vowed to govern. The Zarnak commander stood first, his dark eyes hardening as he addressed the room. "We cannot continue to ignore this threat. These humans, the Deathworlders, have already proven that they are not like any enemy we've faced before. They are ruthless, unpredictable, and they know no fear. We need to act now, before we lose everything." The Nevon representative nodded solemnly, but her voice was calm, almost resigned. "We have already lost so much. We've seen the reports, the destruction, the quiet attacks. We've heard from the survivors, but it's clear that we do not understand this enemy. Their tactics are unlike any we have ever seen." "They're hunting us," the Zarnak commander muttered, his fists clenched. "One by one, they're picking us off, and we have no idea how to stop them. We've sent fleets, we've sent our best soldiers. But nothing works. They don't fight like we do. They don't follow any of the rules we've spent centuries perfecting." The Eshkali leader, always calm and methodical, now spoke. "It's not about fighting by the rules. The humans are a species that lives by one simple principle: Survive at any cost. They don't fight to conquer. They don't fight to dominate. They fight to live, to ensure that they remain the last ones standing. That is what makes them so dangerous. A quiet, uneasy murmur spread across the room. The threat was no longer hypothetical. It was real. The Deathworlders had made their move, and the galaxy was now a battleground. The Council could no longer afford to sit idle. We need to find a way to stop them, the Zarnak commander continued, his voice heavy, with urgency. We cannot wait for them to strike again. We have to act now. How? The Nivon leader asked, her voice shaking with the weight of the question. How do we stop a force that doesn't play by the same rules? How do we defeat them when we don't even understand how they operate? For a moment, there was silence in the chamber. No one had an answer. No one knew how to fight an enemy that had no strategy, no clear goal, except survival. They were relentless, and there was no weakness to exploit. The Eshkali leader shifted, their glowing blue skin catching the light as they leaned forward. We must do what they have done. We must adapt. If we are to survive, we must change the way we fight. This war is not about victory. It is about survival, just as it is for them. A new realization began to settle over the council. The Eshkali were right. The humans had won because they didn't think like the other species in the galaxy. They had fought for their own existence, and in doing so, had brought the galaxy's greatest species to their knees. If the Council had any hope of standing against them, it would need to do more than just wage war. It would need to think differently. We can no longer be a collective of peace-loving species, the Zarnak commander said, his voice now tinged with frustration. We need to fight as one. We need to set aside our differences and face this threat as a united force. We can't wait for another attack. We have to prepare ourselves now. The representatives from various races looked at each other, exchanging uncertain glances. For the first time in history, the Council was considering something unprecedented, true unity. In the face of a common enemy, it seemed the only choice was to put aside old rivalries and focus on survival. But how do we prepara? The Nivon leader asked, clearly struggling with the enormity of the situation. We can't just go to war with the humans. If they're as unpredictable as we've seen, then we'll be walking into a trap. The room fell silent again, as if everyone was waiting for the answer to that question. It was then that the Eshkali leader spoke once more, their voice calm and assured. We must strike at the heart of their operation. We need to understand where they are coming from, what drives them. If they are the predators they appear to be, we must learn how to anticipate their movements. We must study them, understand their methods, and we must prepare our defenses accordingly. We've sent scouts, the Zarnak commander replied, frustration growing in his voice. But they never return. How do we study them when every attempt to engage them ends in failure? The Eshkali leader's eyes flickered with something like pity. Then we must do what they have done. We must adapt. We must be smarter, faster, more ruthless. If we can't fight them in the same way they fight us, then we must outthink them. We must use their own survival instincts against them. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the meaning of the Eshkali's words. They couldn't fight like the humans, and they couldn't outmatch their sheer ruthlessness. But they could outthink them. They could learn to predict their moves and adapt their strategies accordingly. The Zarnak commander's expression softened slightly. You're suggesting we become like them? Yes, the Eshkali leader replied, their voice firm. We must become like them, at least in our thinking. The Deathworlders have shown us that survival is the greatest weapon. We must do whatever it takes to ensure that we, too, survive. The Council was now united in its determination. It would no longer be a collection of individual species, each concerned with its own interests. It would become a single, unified force. one that would adapt, survive, and, if necessary, strike down the Deathworlders before they could destroy everything. The war had only just begun. The galaxy had never faced a threat like this before. The Deathworlders, humans, had shown the entire galaxy that they weren't just another species to be dealt with. They weren't after power, nor did they care for wealth or control. They had one simple but terrifying goal: survival. And they would do anything to ensure that they remained the last ones standing. The Galactic Council had tried to come together, tried to find a way to stop them. But no matter what they did, the humans adapted. Every plan, every tactic failed to even slow them down. They had learned from every encounter, each battle only making them stronger. The humans had no rules. They didn't fight fair, and they didn't show mercy. For the first time in the galaxy's history, the Council was in true danger of losing its power. But they weren't giving up. The Council leaders, realizing that they could not defeat the humans with traditional warfare, now focused all their efforts on understanding the humans' way of thinking. If they couldn't outmatch them in strength or numbers, they would have to be smarter, more strategic. On a secluded planet hidden deep within the galaxy, a new plan was beginning to take shape. The Council had gathered its best minds, scientists, tacticians, and even former military leaders who had survived human attacks, to develop a way to predict the humans' next move. They couldn't defeat them outright, but they could prepare for their next strike, perhaps even use the humans' own strategies against them. The task ahead was monumental. The humans, it seemed, thrived in the chaos of battle, adapting to every environment they found themselves in. To predict their movements was like trying to catch a shadow. But the HFY leader, the one who had urged the Council to adapt, believed that there was a way. "We cannot fight them the same way we have fought each other for centuries," the HFY leader said during one of the Council's secret meetings. "The Deathworlders do not care for honor or tradition. They care only for survival. We must think like they do. We must become hunters." A cold silence settled over the room as the weight of the leader's words sank in. The alien species, who had spent countless millennia building civilizations, now had to rethink everything. It wasn't about advanced technology or military might. It was about the ability to survive in the harshest of conditions, something the humans had mastered. "We must learn their ways," said a Zarnak general, his voice thick with concern. "They move quickly, strike hard, and disappear just as fast. They do not hesitate. They fight with an intensity that we have never seen, and they never stop." The Nevon representative, normally calm and level-headed, now spoke with urgency. "They are relentless. They do not care for our politics, our peace treaties. They have no interest in diplomacy. They will not stop until they are certain that we no longer stand in their way." The room was filled with tension, each representative understanding that the galaxy's future hung in the balance. The humans, these Deathworlders, had already proven that they were capable of wiping out entire civilizations. What made them so dangerous wasn't just their firepower or technology. It was their ability to adapt and survive. But the HFY leader remained calm, even in the face of such overwhelming fear. "We must embrace that which they understand. Best, survival. To survive, the humans take risks, push their limits, and make decisions that others would not dare to make. If we are to survive, we must stop thinking like peaceful diplomats or warriors bound by old codes. We must think like predators." It was a new way of thinking for the Council. The galaxy had always prided itself on its advanced civilizations, its peaceful solutions to problems. But now, in the face of the Deathworlders, all of that seemed irrelevant. The humans had no interest in diplomacy. They did not care for peace. They wanted to survive, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that they did. For the next few months, the galaxy's greatest minds worked together, combining their knowledge of military strategy, technology, and survival. The goal was clear: understand the humans and their tactics, and then create a defense that would make the galaxy a more dangerous place for them. The Council's scientists worked around the clock, studying every scrap of data they could find on the Deathworlders. They learned that the humans' strength was not in their numbers or their ships. It was in their resilience, their adaptability, and their ability to quickly learn from every mistake. They were survivors, and that made them the deadliest predators the galaxy had ever known. But the scientists also discovered something else. The humans had a weakness. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought for survival. Yes, but they also had an instinct to push forward, to take risks, to test their limits. And that, the Council realized, was something they could use to their advantage. We must force them into a position where their survival instincts will drive them to make mistakes, said the Nivon leader. If we can create situations where they are pushed beyond their limits, we may be able to trap them. The plan began to take shape. The Council would set traps, political, military, and psychological, designed to push the humans into taking risks. It wasn't about defeating them in direct combat. It was about outsmarting them, putting them in a position where their desire to survive would work against them. It wasn't long before the Deathworlders noticed that something had changed. The galaxy had become more dangerous. The traps that had been set for them were not as easy to spot. They began to realize that the species they had once seen as weak and predictable were starting to fight back in ways they had never anticipated. The humans were used to being the predators. But now, the galaxy was beginning to learn how to hunt them back. As the Council's plan unfolded, they waited for the first signs that it was working. Every move the humans made was now being watched, analyzed, and countered. The humans would strike, as they always did, but this time they were being forced into situations they could not easily escape from. And for the first time since the Deathworlders had arrived, the galaxy began to feel like it had a chance. The humans, once unstoppable, were now the ones who were being hunted. The galaxy was in chaos, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. The humans, the Deathworlders, had arrived like a storm, relentless, unstoppable, and determined to survive. Their every move had been unpredictable, every attack devastating. But now, for the first time since their appearance, the galaxy's leaders were beginning to feel like they might stand a chance. The tables had turned. The Council had set their plan into motion, carefully crafting a series of traps that were designed to push the humans to their breaking point. They had learned to anticipate their movements, to understand the deadly instincts that guided them. The humans fought for survival, yes, but they had a tendency to take risks that could be used against them, and the Council had learned to turn those very instincts into their advantage. The first wave of humans to fall into these traps was disoriented, their confidence shaken. They had believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy. They had always adapted, always found a way to survive. But now, they were being forced to confront a galaxy that was fighting back. On a distant planet, deep in a remote star system, the Council's combined forces had set their most daring trap. The humans had long used stealth, speed, and fear to dominate their enemies, but this time, they would face something different. The galaxy's greatest minds had devised a plan to draw them out into the open, into a battle that they could not avoid. The planet was a world of harsh landscapes. Rocky, plains, deep ravines, and thick forests that stretched for miles. It was a place that most alien species had long abandoned, not just because of its inhospitable conditions, but because it was largely considered useless. But the Council saw it differently. It would be the perfect place to set a final stand, to force the humans into a direct confrontation. The trap was set. The Council's forces, Zarnax, Nivon, Eshkali, and many others, had mobilized. They stood ready to face the humans, not as separate species, but as a unified front. It was their last chance, and they had to make it count. The Deathworlders were coming, and they had no idea what they were walking into. On the eve of the final battle, the leaders gathered in a secure chamber, awaiting word that the humans were on their way. There was a sense of nervous anticipation. In the air, a quiet understanding that everything had led to this moment. The council's members stood together, knowing that this battle would determine the fate of the galaxy. They were no longer fighting for power or dominance. They were fighting for survival. "We've come this far," said the Zarnak commander, his voice a low growl. "And now we fight together as one. We've learned from the humans, we know their methods. They're not invincible. This ends now." The Eshkali leader nodded. "We've used their own instincts against them. They will come, thinking they can outsmart us. But they won't. This time, we will strike first." The Nivon representative added quietly, "We must remember one thing. They fight to survive, but we fight for something greater. For the galaxy." The silence in the room was profound. They were ready. The humans were coming, and this time, they would be ready for them. As the sun set on the barren planet, the first of the human ships appeared on the horizon, dark and silent, gliding through the sky like shadows. They didn't make a sound as they approached, their movements calculated and precise. The humans had come, just as the council had predicted. But they were walking into a trap that would push them to their limits. The battle began with a sudden flash. The council's forces opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dark sky. The humans had never encountered anything like this before. An organized, coordinated attack from every direction. The alien forces used the terrain to their advantage, setting up ambushes, cutting off escape routes, and forcing the humans into positions where their survival instincts would be tested. Humans, though taken by surprise, quickly adapted. They fought with the same deadly precision that had made them so feared across the galaxy. They moved through the rough terrain like predators, always one step ahead. The fight was brutal, each side using every trick in the book to gain the upper hand. But the Council's forces were different this time. They were united. They were ready. And they were not about to let the Deathworlders destroy everything they had built. The battle raged on for hours, neither side giving ground. It was clear that the humans were strong, but the Council was stronger. Every time the humans made a move, the Council countered. Every time they tried to strike, the Council was there, blocking their path. The Deathworlders had learned to survive through sheer force and adaptability, but now they were being faced with something they hadn't prepared for, a galaxy that had learned to fight back. And then, in the heart of the battlefield, a human commander emerged, a figure who had been directing the assault from the shadows. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face hard as stone, but his eyes, though cold, were filled with a strange determination. He had been the one to lead the humans across the galaxy, to strike at the very core of the galaxy's defenses. And now, he was standing in front of the Council's leaders, facing them directly. "Is this it?" the human commander called out, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Is this the best you can do? Is this the fight that will end us?" For a moment, there was silence. The Council's forces paused, their weapons trained on the human leader. But the Zarnak commander stepped forward, his eyes locked on the human. "No," he said, his voice steady. "This is the fight that ends you. You were predators. Now you are the hunted." The human commander didn't flinch. Instead, he looked out across the battlefield, seeing the many forces of the Council arrayed against him. There was no retreat, no way to escape. He knew this was the final stand. And for the first time he seemed to understand something that had eluded the Deathworlders. Until now, the humans were not invincible. They had survived. But survival was not always enough. In the end, there was always something stronger, something more determined. And in that moment, the human commander made a choice. He knew the battle was lost, but he would ensure that the Humans survived in a different way, a way that would guarantee their future in the galaxy. The final blow came quickly. The human forces, though strong, could not withstand the might of the united galaxy. They fell back, retreating as the Council's forces closed in. The battle was over, but the war was far from done. The humans had been defeated, but they had left an indelible mark on the galaxy. The last stand was over, but the legacy of the Deathworlders would live on. The galaxy had learned something important. Survival, no matter the cost, was the ultimate weapon. And from that day forward, the galaxy would never be the same.